Hello. Sandra, actually, it is my first time to join this meeting, fossil and oil and coal, oil and gas. So I don't know too much, but still I know just elementary knowledge about it. No, it is not a less than a nuclear weapon. It is a major global threat for the world.
Yeah, and we're going to learn more about this exciting new initiative today. And and Barton, he's going to moderate the meeting. So I'm just like here for the moment.
Yeah. Good. Actually, it is made problem, I can say. Human being problem. When you come to India, then good. Sometimes you come to India.
Can you please introduce the speakers today? Question mark. Okay. All right, well, maybe we should get started. Sandra, are you there or you have law? Sandra, do you want to introduce our first speaker, Seble?
Yes, I'm very thrilled to introduce Seble. She's working with the global fossil fuel non-proliferation campaign, which was launched last year, but really gaining momentum since last Earth Day. She's based in Addis Ababa, and she's the coordinator for the city treaty endorsements. And there have actually been already some cities in around the world that have endorsed this treaty. The first one was Vancouver, LA, Barcelona. There's also 2 cities in the UK. So, but there's more and more joining in. And I learned about this initiative in April, attending a global webinar organized by REN 21. That's a renewable energy think tank based in Paris, but they're working globally. And Sephora and Niels, they were introducing this initiative ahead of Earth Day. And I was very much intrigued by this initiative. And yeah, I would like, now give the Seble an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about it. And actually, Mother Earth Project and Parents for Future, along with 400 plus organizations, have already joined this initiative. And Sven Harmeling, our second speaker, he's representing the Climate Action Network, which is also a coalition of civil society groups. They're also part of this supporting group.
Great, thank you. Seble, please tell us a little bit about who you are first, and then jump into what you want to share with us, please.
Perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Seble. I'm the new Global Cities campaign lead for the treaty. Also, please let me know maybe on the chat if the connection cuts out, and I'll sign in otherwise. Okay. So I will just share my screen so I can tell you more about the campaign. Okay, let me go. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
No.
Okay, maybe we just wait a second.
All right, I can do it for, I mean, let me, I'll do it for you.
Okay.
That's fine. You just tell me when you want to switch to the, can you see it now, the screen? Yeah.
I don't see it yet, but I'm assuming it's on.
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, you're started to share. Okay.
Okay, go ahead with yours. It's fine.
I think you're share. Yeah. Actually, why don't you unshare?
My choice. I probably wouldn't want my mom working because.
Let me try to share. I'm going to do it for you. 1 second.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, great. And you let me know. Go ahead.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for being on the call. So as Sandra mentioned, I'm the Global Cities campaign lead for the treaty. And I just wanted to give you some information about what the treaty is to start off, and the initiative for this global campaign. So the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, it kicked off in September of 2020. And it is a global campaign for the phase out of fossil fuels and a just energy transition. We know that we need global and really bold and immediate collective action to address the climate emergency. And then we also know that fossil fuels are the main culprit of causing this very climate emergency, because around 80% of all carbon emissions that have been emitted since the Industrial Revolution come from fossil fuels. So we really need to be phasing out and having a managed decline of fossil fuels and a just transition that requires a massive amount of international cooperation. You can go to the next slide, please. So the dominant approach for dealing with the climate emergency and climate action has generally been around reducing emissions and reducing demand for fossil fuels. But there's been less focus on policies that actually stop fossil fuels at source. Yet over the coming decade, the industry plans for fossil fuel expansion far exceed the Paris climate goals and our ability to have a safe planet and a livable future. And they're completely incompatible, with having a safe planet for everyone to live on. So we need to really decline our production expansion of fossil fuels. And so the treaty initiative is really trying to mobilize around 3 main goals of ending expansion, phasing out current production, and expanding renewable energy and access in a just transition. We really want to change the norms around fossil fuels and tackle the supply side of the climate crisis, and also provide a missing framework that complements demand side approaches for a just transition and grow this movement globally. My role is working with cities and states and subnational governments to endorse the treaty and really put pressure from below on stopping coal, oil, and gas expansion. And we're also working with Carbon Tracker on a global registry for fossil fuels to have access to information on fossil fuel reserves, and which countries and companies this is attributed to increase the transparency and accountability of the fossil fuel industry, because this is currently not publicly available, and also complement the really important struggles around frontline resistance and divestment, fossil-free politics, all these really important campaigns. You can go to the next slide. So this is an image from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report, and it shows basically what are the biggest risks and threats facing humanity, with on the x-axis the likelihood of that risk actually happening, and then the y-axis shows the impact if it does happen. And you can see at the very top, the highest risk facing humanity is climate action failure, with a combination of both its likelihood and its impact if it does happen. So we know we need a massive international response. You can go to the next slide. So, oops. Oh yeah, okay, so this is basically, I hope you've seen the production gap report that came out in 2019 and also in 2020. So this is basically to show the discrepancy with what is consistent with the 2-degree or 1.5-degree pathway, and what are actually the production plans of different countries. We have to be declining emissions around 6 to 7% every year, but actually the production plans from fossil fuel industry overshoots a 2-degree scenario by 50% and a 1.5-degree scenario by 120%. You can go to the next slide. This next slide is just to visualize in a different way that even if we were to overnight stop all coal production and rapidly decrease cement emissions, we would still overshoot a 1.5-degree scenario by the current oil and gas reserves that we have currently in operation, let alone those that are planned for expansion. Next slide. So this is a quote from the International Energy Agency, which is the top energy forecaster in the world, that last month in their 1.5-degree scenario said, there is no need for investment in new fossil fuel supply in our net zero pathway. So making it abundantly clear that we don't need a single expansion anywhere on this planet. Next slide. Also, we're aware that the climate crisis does not exist in a silo, and that there are underlying root causes and systemic inequality that exacerbate the climate crisis, and that in the just transition, justice and equity will have to be really centered, especially with wealthy countries who have historically extracted so much more, funding and leading a lot of this transition because they are those most responsible for the climate emergency we now all face. Next slide, please. And here is an image of the Paris Agreement, which is definitely a reason to celebrate, but it also has things that could be complementary. Doesn't mention coal, oil, or gas, and it focuses, like I said before, more on emissions and demand side. So the treaty could be a really complementary way of supporting climate action by tackling supply side and not only demand side for climate action, because the current targets and pledges from the Paris Agreement lead us to a 3-degree warming by the end of the century. Next slide, please. Here is a way of visualizing how this transition can look like. On the x-axis, the horizontal plane, we see what share of government revenues come from oil profits. And so you see that there's some countries like Congo, Iraq, that are really dependent on oil revenues for their government income, whereas those that are closer to the center line are less dependent. So you see countries like the UK, Canada, the US, Norway have less dependency on oil shares for their government revenue and for taxation and provision of public services, but they have a much higher GDPs. And so this is in the production gap report and another research I can share that's on the Fossil Fuel Treaty website. But it shows those most capable of funding a transition are the ones with the highest GDPs that are least dependent on oil shares as their government revenue, but obviously require a lot of international cooperation for this to be possible. The next slide, please. This is another representation, but instead of oil shares of government revenue, it shows coal mining and coal workers as a percentage of the employment in different countries. And then on the y-axis, again, the GDP. So this shows countries like Germany, the USA, they have a smaller share of their employees are working in coal mining sector, but they have higher GDPs. And so again, these would be the ones that are funding this transition. Next slide, please. So the three pillars of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty maybe look familiar to those who were alive in the 1960s, because it uses the same three pillars. Non-proliferation, which is to stop the expansion, exploration, and production of any new reserves of fossil fuels. Global disarmament is to phase out the existing stockpiles and reserves of fossil fuels in line with a 1.5-degree pathway, the ones that currently exist. And the peaceful or just transition is transitioning to renewable energy sources in an equitable way and increasing cooperation and access. Next slide, please. So as you know, we take inspiration from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty with the three pillars because they map on really well to the climate transition, but also because we're using this analogy, just as nuclear weapons are fossil fuel, are weapons of mass destruction, so too is the framing of fossil fuels, because they contribute 80% of the emissions that are causing the climate emergency we all face today. But of course, this treaty did have its shortcomings, so we also looked to other examples for inspiration, like the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which used a huge amount of civil society coordination. And also even countries that didn't have nuclear weapons were able to increase international pressure and mobilize for a treaty to take place. Next slide, please. I'll go through these ones quickly, but I think everyone knows this. Where business as usual leaves us on track to a really apocalyptic near future and overshooting a lot of our targets. We really need to nearly halve our emissions by the end of this decade. And so this requires really radical and systemic action. Next slide, please. We know that we face massive amounts of risk if we delay in our action of overshooting our climate goals and our temperature goals, leaving people who are working in the fossil fuel industry incredibly vulnerable, having stranded assets like we saw with this oil surplus during the pandemic, and having a really volatile geopolitical climate as well. Next slide, please. So as the treaty, we are a directed network and we're guided by a really amazing global steering committee. We have partners on the different continents, and we have 400, I think maybe it's now 500 different organizations from different constituencies that have endorsed this call for the treaty. And then we work regionally. We also do a lot of research work to underpin our campaign and political advocacy to see if we can get first mover countries that could support the campaign. On the next slide, you can see the wonderful steering committee that is supporting our work and helping in our strategy. So maybe you recognize some of these different players in the global climate justice movement. The next slide shows basically how we work in imagining this fossil fuel phase out to a just transition, the engagement we have with countries globally and the research work that supports our campaign, how we coordinate with regional hubs and campaign with also Strong's communications team, and of course the city's engagement that I will mention in the coming slides. And if you're interested to get involved also, that's great. So the next slide is around our theory of change. And basically, I'll just summarize because I know there's a lot of words on the screen, but we want to be supporting this growing global movement for a just transition and really shifting the narrative. It's not only the end point that we get to, the journey is also really important in reframing fossil fuels as these weapons of mass destruction, shifting, well, not only shifting, but really supporting the supply side action and stopping fossil fuels at source, making sure all the information is globally accessible to all for free and open with the Global Registry for Fossil Fuels, with Carbon Tracker. We want to build political pressure from below with the city's campaign that can really turn the direction of countries that even have a lot of fossil fuel expansion plans, such as the US and Canada. And also pressure internationally with first mover countries that have passed keep it in the ground policies, things like this. Creating research, like we're working on a 1.5-degree pathway right now that says not only do we need to end expansion, we need to phase out what currently exists because that's also overshooting our temperature pathways. And we also have enough renewable energy to power our world. So this will be coming out soon around the G7 meeting, and also supporting different struggles that exist that I'll get to later. On the next slide, you can see different organizations that have endorsed globally, including Mother Earth Project. So this originally, now on the slide says 400, but I think it's grown to around 500 different organizations globally. So if you also want to endorse, you can do so on the website. The next slide shows the regional partners that we work with on the continents to really go through local networks. If you go to the next slide, we also just imagine ourselves in this mosaic of different climate struggles. There's frontline struggles, resisting fossil fuel expansion on their territories. There's also really important finance and divestment campaigns to end fossil fuel subsidies and finance to the sector, and demand side campaigns to end emissions and reduce demand for fossil fuels. There's also really important campaigns around fossil-free politics and reducing the undue influence of the industry on our politics and liability of making polluters pay. So we see that we fit into this with the supply side component of stopping the production and expansion of fossil fuels. You can skip the next slide and go to the one after, actually, that says campaigns and cons. Yeah, so this is a resource hub, campaign resources hub that we have online that's available to everyone. It shows if you want to start your own campaign, different resources for that, social media packs. For now, it's available in English, French, and Spanish, but we will be translating to other languages if you want to be able to use that in your own context. The next slide just shows kind of the media buzz it's been getting. I think it's a campaign whose time has come. And on the next slide, you can see this was just before Biden did the Climate Leaders Summit in April, right before Earth Day, but the Dalai Lama and 100 other Nobel laureates endorsed the call for the fossil fuel treaty. So it's been gaining momentum. And the next slide, which I wanted to talk to everyone about, which is more where my role fits, is with the city's campaign. So as Sandra said, the first city in the world to endorse was Vancouver. LA and Barcelona have also endorsed. A couple municipalities in the UK, even one that's reliant on coal, is looking for a new path. We've had Moreland City Council in Melbourne, Australia, and this week the Australian Capital Territory, ACT, endorsed, which is the highest level of government to so far have endorsed. And there's a lot of mobilization also with the Greens Party. And a couple, Yakima today actually in the US just endorsed. We have campaigns happening globally. They happen in different ways. There's sometimes progressive city council members that want to put forward motions to their city councils to have them debated and passed in their city councils, or also grassroots organizations that are campaigning for treaty to be endorsed in their cities, like Friends of the Earth is doing in cities across Sweden, and the Toronto Climate Action Network is doing in Toronto. So if you're keen to get involved, feel free to be in touch about doing a campaign in your city, because it's a really good way to kind of mobilize action from the ground up and influence your national governments, which is eventually what we want to get to. You can skip the next slide and go to the 28. And this one is basically, we want to also look to first mover countries, ones that have passed keep it in the ground policies, and also targeting countries that have a lot of fossil fuel expansion planned. We hope to have a UN formal report on fossil fuels and eventually be building this up into a treaty regime. You can skip this one and go to the last one, which is just to say we welcome you to get involved. We're so excited that Mother Earth Project has endorsed. Sorry, no, you can go back up. It's the, yeah, 31. The next one, the one that says, what can you do? Yes, perfect. So yeah, I just welcome you all to stay engaged. You can feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, but we're really just trying to grow this global campaign that I think you're all a part of in different ways, and really ensure that we can, within this decade, really promote a phase out of fossil fuels and a new era with a just transition. So thank you all for having me, and that's all from me for now.
Seble, that was phenomenal. I really appreciate you sharing with everybody all this information. I have just a couple quick questions, and then maybe we can take questions also. Maybe we can hold questions. But when you say people are endorsing this treaty, what does that mean other than signing up? Are you basically asking people to commit to reducing the use of fossil fuels as well? Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's different ways to endorse. You can endorse as an individual, you can endorse as an organization, or also you can endorse as a city. So when an individual endorses or an organization endorses, their ethos or their vision is also behind that, the pillars that we have of stopping expansion and having a managed decline and a just transition. But cities also, they also have different levels of influence depending on the countries they're in. And we're trying to kind of have a menu of options of what are supply side actions that cities can take once they've endorsed. So it could be really important campaigns like fossil-free politics, stopping the revolving door between industry and politics, or stopping. Amsterdam's done this amazing campaign to stop fossil fuel advertising in their city. You can also have, also in the Netherlands, was on a call with them on Tuesday, they have fossil-free culture that stops partnerships of public cultural institutions with fossil fuel industry. So we're basically going to be creating kind of a range of supply side options that actually cities have jurisdiction over that they can implement in their municipalities. And we also welcome suggestions because we're just developing our strategy now, and we're also partnering with Safe Cities, which is of Stand Earth, and they've been working in US cities to have kind of really concrete actions of more demand side, like retrofitting buildings or changing the electric grid, things like this, also supply side. So we're still developing kind of the specific actions that different cities can take once they've endorsed, but it's also really powerful to their national governments. We also ask them to write up to their national governments to say we've endorsed and are encouraging all the national level to take action.
Great, Seble. That was phenomenal. And I think we all can see that there are many things we can do to make to help move the needle. There's just so many things that can be done and should be done and need to be done. What I'd like to ask everyone to do is to think about questions for Seble. But before we do that, I'd like to move on to our next speaker so that we can get going with that. I'll just say very quickly, again, for those that are new on this call, the Mother Earth Project is running this webinar, and we're basically an organization that activates communities worldwide using art. We were inspired by the HIV/AIDS quilts of the 1990s, which was one of the most successful social awareness campaigns. And in the same way, we feel that we have found the sweet spot by using parachutes, which are play parachutes. You can see one behind Sandra, and also behind Laxmi, and people paint them with beautiful artwork, their concerned comments about the climate emergency, and by sharing as they sit around a parachute, they come together as communities and they find ways to take collective sustainable actions together, which could be anything from planting trees to taking their parachutes and doing photo opportunities with their local politicians, and then demanding better climate actions. So this activity is one based on art, but it's still very much aligned to this non-proliferation treaty that Seble just shared with us. And we're here basically to activate all the small voices in small communities around the world. And presently we're in over 75 countries, and people really are responding to this project. And we're just very excited that we can help be a part of moving the needle, because we need to move it fast and aggressively. And anyway, I'd like to pass it back to Sandra to introduce our next speaker.
Right, and now we are here in Bonn. Sven Harmeling, he's based in Bonn, but he's working internationally for Care International. and he is the climate policy advisor for CARE International, but also he's the lead person for the Climate Action Network. Now that is a coalition of NGOs, civic society organizations that are working on the climate issue. And I've met Sven, I guess, many years, it feels right now, ago during these negotiations, because I mean, Bonn is a UN city and we have the headquarters of the UN climate secretaries and basically the climate, the Paris Climate Agreement was negotiated here. And there were, I mean, and I was there as a journalist and sometimes as an NGO observer. They were negotiating every single word. I mean, like, single. And it's so amazing that in this agreement, which is a huge success, that, you know, 190 countries could engage to this treaty, but they never really mentioned the elephant in the room, the fossil fuels. And Sven, he's then at this when we have here this negotiations, there's they're very active, representing the civil society movement. He can tell you a little bit more. They have their side events, they have their press conferences, but they're really pushing for also the aspect of the climate justice. And and I would like to give the word to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra, and nice to meet all of you. And thank you also, Seble, for this very informative presentation. And I've been in the climate movement since 15 years, mostly focused on international issues, as Sandra also alluded to. I put into the back of my screen, so to say, the famous Maritime Hotel in Bonn. I don't know who of you have ever been there, but for many years it was basically the center of the regular negotiations happening here in Bonn. Even the COP in 2001 took place there. Now the negotiations have moved to a newer conference center, but for some people it creates some nostalgic feelings about negotiations. But I think one point which Seble also elaborated on is one of the central weaknesses of an international consensus-based climate negotiation process is that the elephant in the room, despite all the facts that are out there, has never been named, or at least not named in a way that you find it specifically in the Paris Agreement or even in the preceding UNFCCC, so the convention itself. And that's of course not surprising, because I mean, all the major countries have their stakes in fossil fuels, so to say, either as major producers or major consumers. And for many years this has really hindered a really like progressive and targeted conversation about not only how to substitute fossil fuels with renewables, but also active policies to ensure that they are left in the ground. But I think that's why this initiative is also very timely. Today we can look at this differently than 20 years ago. We have much more clarity on the solutions and on the alternatives. We have rapidly decreasing cost curves for many renewables. Seble also mentioned the new International Energy Agency report, the first one from the IEA, which really looked into a 1.5 degree scenario. And one has to say that the IEA for many years has been one of the main promotional organizations for fossil fuels. And it took a long time, and it even required setting up, let's say, competitive institutions like the International Renewable Energy Agency to get the IEA to move more critically on that. So that's also real, transformative change happening there. But of course, the enemy also fights back, so to say. There's still much more work that needs to be done around fossil fuels. I think if I look at this from an international policy context, what is positive today is that there have also been some, very concrete examples where countries have taken decision to leave fossil fuels in the ground. I don't have all of these examples in my head, but for example, France, I think last year made a commitment that on their, what is it called, on the territories outside the mainland, there would be no longer exploration of fossil fuels. I think some cities were mentioned, and there are also even some of the, let's say, oil countries in the Arabic region haven't committed to zero fossil fuels, of course, but some of them have really developed visions how to get away from fossil fuels. If you look at the United Arab Emirates, for example. But I think we also see that we can do a lot on the, let's say, consumer side and reduce emissions through renewable energy, electricity, through electric vehicles, etc. But there's always a challenge if only a few countries or a few million people do this, then those who supply the fossil fuels, of course, will look for other buyers because they still depend a lot on the selling of fossil fuels, and you showed this in your slide. So I think there's a very clear need to tackle this problem on the supply side. And what I also like about the initiative is that while it's labeled a treaty, it's not about primarily, at least in my understanding, getting to a negotiated agreement among governments, but it looks at it from the wider perspective that everyone can be part of this, that by every step you take to reduce or even stay away from fossil fuels, you can be a part, and cities can take such actions. Just an example here of Bonn. 2 kilometers from here, some new houses were built a year or 2 years ago, and they put up a new gas line station in the year 2019, where 2 kilometers away, 2 other gas stations are there. This is not allowed. This must not happen in the future, right? So even in the city level, there are steps that can be taken to really stop making use of fossil fuels. We know it's a transition. We know it cannot happen overnight. But I think that's quite important. And also from a European perspective, as Sandra mentioned, I'm working with Climate Action Network Europe. Of course, phasing out fossil fuels gradually as fast as possible is key to achieving our climate goals. And we as Can Europe are also pushing for more ambitious goals than the European Union has been able to agree yet. So that's a continued work, but we are also integrating this message, for example, into the European cooperation. Just today, we sent a letter on the EU-US summit, which is taking place on the 15th of June, highlighting some of those messages and others. So before I close, let me just bring in my perspective as a Bonn citizen, because that's also part of my job here today, I would say, and that, there are many active people in Bonn, and it's great to see that the number has grown. We have a very active Parents for Future movement, and I think Sandra will talk a bit more about the upcoming activities. But one of the reasons why we're also looking into starting this campaign or putting pressure on the City Council to endorse the treaty is because Bonn is the global climate diplomacy city, as it has been mentioned, right? We have the UNFCCC Secretariat here. Many of the agreements have been negotiated to a large extent in Bonn, and Bonn has also made some steps. The objective for climate neutrality by 2035 has been endorsed. I think now it's 1.5 years ago. But we're also seeing how small or how slow some of the steps are. Since last year, we now have a city council which has a green left-wing sort of majority, and there have already been some new initiatives on climate. So I think there's also an important moment here for us to trigger that endorsing of the treaty in Bonn, and I hope we can also learn maybe from some of the other cities and the strategies that have been used there. So looking forward also to be in contact with Seble afterwards. So I leave it with that from my side, and back to Sandra. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you so much, Sven. That was fantastic presentation, giving your perspective, and I think that I think back of when the first time Greta Thunberg spoke about how we need a systems change. I remember thinking to myself, even as already an environmentalist, I didn't really know what that meant. It was such a big word and it had no meaning to me. And now hearing both you and Seble speak about what that means, all the details, is very powerful. And it shows that, you know, we all are trying to figure out what it means to have system change. And I think two things quickly come to mind. One is I just recently heard that the Biden administration has stopped any more oil exploration in Alaska, which is one way of stopping the expansion, as Seble mentioned. And then the second thing, which I think is even more substantial, is this Royal Dutch Shell, this litigation against them that was handed down just recently, that basically said that they need to be responsible for their entire carbon footprint, including all their end users of their fuel, amongst a lot of other things. And I think this is going to be a momentous moment for future litigation against oil companies, and it will hopefully accelerate requiring them to have more responsibility and not just sort of greenwashing their companies. I'd like to open up, Sandra, I'd like to hear your input, but I'd like to open up this Zoom call to people's questions, because I really would like to hear people's perspectives from different places around the world. So if you could hit the bottom of your screen, it says raise hand, and then I'll call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. That would be great. If you have any questions, I'm looking around. If anybody has a question, please go ahead, or wants to make a comment as it relates to their country. I'd like to open it up now. Okay, why don't you go ahead, Alejandra. Can you unclick yourself? Sure.
Thank you so much. I just couldn't find the little hand. Sorry about that. But anyways, thank you so much. The question is for Seble. I just want to know whether you have reached anyone or any organization, either public or governmental, here in Mexico. Are there any plans? If you haven't done it so far, can you tell me about it?
Yeah, hi Alejandra, thanks for your question. So I only started 1 month ago with the treaty, and we haven't reached out to Mexico yet, but I have a call with the bicycle mayor of Mexico City on Thursday, Arely Carrion, and we'll be chatting about the possibility of having a campaign there. I don't know where you're based in Mexico.
I'm actually in Mexico City.
Oh, also, okay.
Yes.
Well, we can also have a campaign. I can maybe have a chat with you after I talk to Arely and see what's possible.
I'd love to.
You're working in the climate space there?
Yes, but from a school, from a private school. I am in charge of everything related to, like environmental awareness and everything. But only the private school. I don't belong to any like big organization or anything like that. But sorry to disappoint you. But
no. Everyone is amazing.
But I am very, very, I was like really, really amazed by all the information that you gave us. And I'm sure that this can actually make a huge impact in our school. It's not a very big school, but we have done some things that have been like outstanding. And well, if you could contact me later, I could reach you later on. I would love to have a meeting later with you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
I'll message you now in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, please look to the chat. And I see we have 3 questions. I'm going to first go with Benjamin. If everyone could just say who they are and where they're from, and a quick introduction of their background, and just ask the question, please.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Benjamin from Nigeria. Yes, I work with a government agency, National Agricultural Quarantine Service. I know this work will benefit a lot of individuals, especially in Africa. So I would like to know, how can the organization I work for benefit from this fossil fuel, so that it can help bridge the gap with young persons and governments, and as well as use this as a means of getting employment for other young persons in these spheres of our country. So how can we use this fossil fuel as in bring about employment for young persons in Africa, especially in Nigeria that I live? Thank you.
Sandra, Seble, can you answer that question, or do you have?
Sorry, if I misunderstood, the question is how can fossil fuels provide an income source for young people? Is that the question? Well, I think we might be working in the opposite direction is the thing.
Is that your question, Benjamin? Unmute yourself, please. I muted you by accident.
Okay. I said I work with a government agency, and I would like to know how the fossil fuel, how can young individuals also benefit, making this as a source of income, in making themselves better, and also creating a better living environment for individuals wherever they find themselves, especially in Africa, Nigeria. Did you get my question?
Yeah, I got your question, but so with the treaty, we're actually not trying to expand fossil fuels. We're trying to do the opposite, which is to stop the expansion and phase out. And I know that Nigeria, of course, has a long history with oil extraction. And what I was trying to show in the chart is like who would lead in this transition and who would be supported in the transition. So Nigeria would not be one of the first movers. I think it was the US, the UK, Norway, and Canada that would be kind of leading this transition. But I think it's more what kind of options can come from the renewable energy sector and a phase down of fossil fuels rather than an expansion of the sector for young people.
Mm-hmm. So I think that what Seble is trying to emphasize is that we need countries like the US to lead and to show how large fossil fuel countries can actually make this transition and use that as an example for other countries like Nigeria, which would then sort of copy similar systemic type of changes that are going on in the US and use those ideas in Nigeria. Is that correct, Seble? Would you say?
Yeah, I was just trying to share kind of the idea of how a just transition could work, but I know that actually Carbon Tracker recently just did a presentation specifically on Nigeria and just transition. So I'm going to put the link in the chat right now.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move to our next question. We have Sarah from Maryland. Go ahead, Sarah. Please tell us about.
I just wanted to comment and maybe question, but it's really more a comment. I'm very impressed with both presentations, and I've been a longtime supporter of the Mother Earth Project. I just wanted to ask if you have worked with or contacted any of the worldwide religious organizations and even national faith-based organizations. It's not going to work unless everything starts happening at a grassroots level and sort of percolates up. And it's not that faith-based organizations are all of one mind about these matters, but presenting it as really the creation that has been given to us, that we are in danger of violating in many ways. I just highly recommend some of the organizations like the World Council of Churches, the World Parliament of Religions, Interfaith Power and Light. If you haven't already, think about also giving them a presentation like the one you've just given us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. That's incredible advice. And there's been good work around faith organizing. I think the organization that comes to mind first is Green Faith. I think.
starting to lose you, Seble. There you go.
Barton and I, we had also brief Zoom call with the global coordinator of the fossil fuel treaty, and he's based in, it's Alex, he's based in Colombia, and one of his points was really engaging faith communities. So they very much in line with you.
Awesome. Before Sandra, I'd like to let you talk a little bit more, but I would like to call on Andrew, who has a question from Rwanda. Andrew, will you please go ahead and tell us about who you are first before you ask your question?
Okay, come here.
Yes, I'm not positive, but please go ahead, try.
Yes, my name is Mahame Andrew. I'm based in Rwanda. Yes, my concern is similar to Salah. There have been war between scientists and politicians because these are the people who are most understanding this more than community and religious leader. And we believe that and religious community are well informed and documented. These things of climate change would go better because you see, for example, here in Rwanda, we have been using parachute as one of the way of campaigning, but it is a way because we design it our own way, and even the way how it is understandable in our community. But when you see most of the document, it is more scientific, and it mostly are interpreted by politicians in the way how they want it. I can give you an example. In East Africa, they are building a pipeline from Uganda to Tanzania, but the way how it is explained to the community, it has confused them. They don't have any clue and even danger of that pipeline. So we want to know, is there any simple and understandable document that can be explained to the community and even include the because for us, we are in community where those people don't understand even the word fuel oil. I think you understand me. Thank you very much.
That's great, Andrew. Basically, it sounds like you need to have access to information about the science of the dangers of pipelines in particular. Seble, do you have that type of information that you could share as a link for Andrew so that he can share that with communities in Rwanda?
I'm sorry, my internet dropped off, so I didn't hear all of the question, but I know that 350.org is coordinating a really good campaign in Uganda and Tanzania against the East African crude oil pipeline. And I can share the website here.
Okay.
If that's helpful for everyone.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Andrew, Seble is going to share a informative website on the chat, so please take a look there. I see another question. If we could go, it's 1 o'clock. We did start our meeting late, about 10 minutes. So if you don't mind, we'll continue on a little bit more. I'd like to call on Iona. Connor, could you just tell us who you are and what your interests are and your question, please?
Sure. I've been an environmentalist for like 55 years, and I publish a climate newspaper. And when Sarah was speaking, I opened my newspaper to an ad about an interfaith online conference in August. And is it possible to screen share? Because I can show you that ad.
Sure. 1 second. I will make you a co-host and you can share it. There you go.
Thank you. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
All right. Shall I stop sharing now?
You can explain it if you want to briefly.
Oh, okay. So these are friends of mine in the US, actually a former priest and a former nun who are married now, and they have been to Kenya and they have worked seriously on African issues and other issues most of their lives. And they're the ones who are organizing this. And then there's a little bit in my newspaper about their vision and what they're going to be doing.
Great.
And I love publishing my newspaper. So it has 4 sections. One is climate emergency. Another one is earth regeneration. The third one is ending inequality. And the last one is human interest.
Great, thank you. And if you would be kind enough to share the link to your newspaper, if it has an online link, that would be awesome for everyone to see.
I will, thank you. Thanks for letting me share.
Oh, our pleasure. We're here to share each other's stories. This is sort of like a parachute community event. I mean, this is what we do. We sit around a parachute, we talk about our concerns, what our sustainable actions are. We talk about collective actions together. So this is identical. And I'd like to maybe end today with Sandra. Why don't you share some of your thoughts? Sandra was the one who organized this webinar and was able to contact Sven and Seble. So Sandra, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you share the,
Sure, 1 second.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
I'm engaged here locally with the climate movement, but also internationally. And for me, being here in Bonn, UN City, and the headquarters of the climate secretariat, it was also like bringing together the local and the global players. So we've been working on that for a long time, and the climate justice movement has gained a lot of momentum, of course, everywhere in around the world, in many cities, but also in Bonn. And in Bonn, we can also tap into the knowledge of, like parents, like Sven. And now the city of Bonn has declared a climate emergency, as Sven mentioned 2 years ago. They decided to go climate neutral by the year of 35. But we think as coming together as initiatives. We also have, because of the narrative here right now in Germany is climate change is costly. We have to change our way of lifestyle. It's going to be terrible. And we want to change a little bit the narrative. And that's why we have decided to do something here for World Environmental Day, which is on Saturday, which tells a little bit another story, and presenting local initiatives and groups that are actually doing the transition. Because and maybe you can show the little presentation, or should I open my screen?
You can share your screen, but we probably want to wrap up the meeting in like less than 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. But one of our actors And we're going to do this as public arts, various community outreach, and it was really difficult to conceptualize this activity, this activation, because we were under lockdown conditions. So it was like, is this all virtual, hybrid, or maybe some outdoor activation? We're going to do this with the parachutes, but other public art. But we have also Nicola right now, and one of our activists, she's who's going to be, you know, like presenting this idea of changing the world, is also a speaker in the TEDx. Maybe Nicola, you can say something.
Hello, everybody. I really like to share our story with you. Thanks for staying in touch, because we are run out of time a bit. So I make it quick and dirty. No, quick. Martin, is it possible to share my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. I just want to invite you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to invite you to our TEDx conference in Bonn on the 8th of June. And we invited a lot of interesting storytellers. Our topic is stories of sustainability, because we think due to the pandemic, it's time to turn it around. So we are connected to the United Nations SDG Action Campaign. It's their hashtag. They use it as a campaign, turn it around. And we share different visions from the society, from the arts, from the politics. And these are our speakers. As I mentioned before, Marina Ponti, who is the director of the United Nations SDG Action Campaign. She's talking about turning the world upside down for social climate justice. And as Sandra mentioned before, Daniel Breitfelder, an actor, he is speaking about his journey. He's cleaning up the River Rhine every day in a character. He's a kind of a ranger. It's very funny and very touching, because he inspires people to change their lives. As you can see, different perspectives from all over, from different people. Mostly from Germany, but the whole event is in English. Not everybody is actually from Germany. They are all based in Bonn, which is a very international city. And this is how you can register. I posted the event into the chat, so you can just join it. It's free. And if you are interested, I really like to see you there. It's a live stream event, and then the TED Talks are 1 or 2 weeks later on the TEDx platform.
Yes, and I also would like to make an announcement. In Bonn on June 5th, next Saturday, we're going to announce that we are going to launch a local campaign, and we're going to bury the fossil fuels in this activation that we're planning, and announce that we're going to submit a citizen proposal for a city endorsement of this fossil fuel treaty.
That's great.
We hope that Germany, Bonn will be the first city in Germany to endorse this.
That's great. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Seble and Sven, who's no longer with us. We're winding down. So I'd like to bring this webinar to a close with those that are remaining, and just show my profound appreciation for everybody who's come to us today from around the world. It's amazing that we can connect and be friends and have common goals, especially in this very pressing situation of the climate emergency. we like to end by joining around our parachutes, and we bring our hands on the handles of the parachute. And if everyone can bring their hands up to show that we're a part of the same community, and wave the parachute, that's sort of our way of sort of being together. This is our physical connecting to each other. So I'd like to end by doing that and wish everyone a wonderful day. And let's stay connected. And also I did ask everyone to put their email on the chat so that we can stay connected, because I know that Seble would like to reach out to you later for those who are interested. So if you'd be kind enough to add your email right now, I'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll bring this to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You can unmute yourself and chime in if you want to and say hi.
My
Thank you. Thank
next
you.
story has a center in Cameroon that they just built, and it's for clean energy. It's a training institute, and I just love this idea.
Please contact us if you want to have any more information. I just put our Gmail down there at the bottom of the chat. I see Ala Hassan. How you doing, Ala Hassan? Great to see everybody.
Fine, Pansy, and you?
Great. Okay. Be well, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.